Hey everyone, my name is Jordan Powers, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm an architectural photographer based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and Asheville, North Carolina. Long story, not going to get into it right now. Each month, I host a public call for architecture and interior and real estate photographers, and it's part of what I call the Open Book Club. And what that is, it's a community of photographers who share openly details of their business, practices, and pretty much anything that we can do to help each other grow in our businesses. The Open Book Club consists of a podcast, behind the scenes videos, and a bunch of other things. I'm not going to get into them right now. If you want to check it out, you can do so below. But another part of the Open Book Club that is open to the public are these monthly calls. Now, these monthly calls are designed to be long-form conversations amongst a group of photographers sharing their experiences around one particular topic. One of the problems that we face in this industry is that we're limited to the anecdotal things that show up in the Facebook groups and the one-on-one conversations we have with fellow photographers. But to have a group of photographers from all different levels of experience and parts of the world come together in one call and share their experiences about one particular topic, it's incredibly valuable. And so I wanted to help bring something to the community that's not a course, that's absolutely free, that people can come to for free and just share and learn and grow together. So if you want to learn more, you can click on the link below. Like I said, if you don't want to join the Open Book Club itself and you just want to participate in these calls, you can sign up for the mailing list and I'll notify you anytime there's a new call that's going to be coming up. Again, they happen once a month and I'm not going to spam you. Now, the call you're about to watch was on the topic of licensing transparency. One of the subjects that's been becoming more and more popular over the last few years is the subject of image licensing, especially as sharing photos and the theft of our photos has been more prevalent because of social media, quite frankly. There's so much more to talk about licensing aside from just theft and things like that. There's proactively relicensing your images for a fee. There's working with magazines. There's how do we have the conversations with our clients about licensing? How do we deal with third parties when it comes to licensing? There's so many questions around licensing that you can't just possibly cover those in a Facebook group or a course even. So the next best thing is to have an open discussion amongst a group of people who have knowledge in that area. And that's exactly what we did tonight. So we had around 30 people. A good portion of those people were actually participating and offering expertise. If you want to skip around and just look at the particular topics and you're watching this on YouTube, you can look below in the description. I have chapter markers that'll bring you to the topic that we covered. But if you find this valuable, again, please sign up for the Open Book Club, get notified for future calls. I don't know what these topics are going to be ahead of time, so oftentimes it's taking the entire month to determine what the most important topic to talk about that coming month is, and it's often related to what's been the conversation in the industry. And this last month has been the topic of licensing. There's been also other things we've talked about, of course, but licensing has been prominent because of a particular Instagram post that was being shared. I'm not going to get into that now. I'm rambling as usual, so let's go ahead and jump into the call. I really think this is a conversation that all photographers in our niche need to be part of. And unfortunately, not everybody can make it. So I'm hoping that this, at the very least, helps, gives people something to watch or listen to when they're on the road, or just something to at least get the conversation started. And I hope to have, not necessarily just me, but I hope to encourage the community to start having more conversations about this. And I think for me, obviously you guys know Adam and Brian. Well, most of you should know Adam and Brian. If not, Adam is, I learned almost most of what I know about licensing, like relicensing, through Adam. And then it's just been kind of my own personal journey since then. Brian and I have had an interesting experience with licensing very recently. I don't know how much we can share the details on that, but we might get into it a little bit. But again, the whole point I'm hoping is I can get everybody to, well, as many people that are comfortable to hop in and share thoughts and experiment. And I'll just kind of help facilitate the conversation. I don't have a ton of expertise. Adam or Brian, did you guys want to chime in and just because part of this reason this call happened was because Adam and Brian were having a separate conversation about licensing. I was having a separate conversation with Brian about licensing, and I was having a separate conversation with Adam about licensing. Mm-hmm. And most recently, everybody's seen that post that everybody was sharing regarding that publication in Detroit. If you haven't seen that yet, I'll see if I can dig it up. But there was just, it was just kind of a post that got shared that showed the terms of this publication in Detroit. And just the outrageous terms that they were asking for when it came to sharing images. And that sparked a lot of conversation. but I think there's only so much we can do when we're just sharing stuff on Instagram. I think we really need to get to the point where everybody's comfortable taking action and is educated and confident enough to have those discussions before they become problems. So anyway, I'm going to stop yapping away for a while and let other people kind of jump on. But really quick, Brian and Adam, do you guys just want to talk through like what your conversation was, and maybe that'll trigger some conversation here?
Yeah, I don't remember how our conversation started, Adam. Do you remember how it started? You were asking me, I think it was the retail store. You got a job doing a retail store recently, if I'm not mistaken. And you were asking me how licensing works for retail. I think that's how we got into it.
I think my initial question to you was, since you do shoot a lot of retail stores, my question was, when setting up your agreement with your client, do you include marketing, advertising, PR? Like, how far does it extend out? Because I know PR is very important to retail stores and their marketing efforts. And so I wanted to essentially make sure that when I bid this job out, that I was kind of staying in line with quote unquote the industry standard, or at least what your standard might be. And so yeah, that's kind of why I reached out to you, is just seeing where your limitations are with your clients.
Sure. Yeah. And just to answer that publicly, I guess, because we might as well, that's why we're here. I do shoot a lot of retail, and probably out of all the retail brands I do shoot for, I think almost all of them, I shoot for the PR or marketing department. And when you're shooting for the PR, one thing that I learned very early on when I started doing retail in end of 2018, early 2019, especially when you're working for PR, is that your images are most likely going to end up everywhere in the world. And nothing you can do about it. I don't know if you guys, I did a shoot 2 weeks ago for Gucci, a new store that opened in Detroit, and those images were everywhere. They made their rounds on the internet all over the place. So that's just part of it, and you just have to charge accordingly. And unfortunately, there's nothing I can do to manage any type of infringements. And they kind of laid that out to me before when I started at the beginning, because when they put it out on the PR syndicates, they're just going to get picked up by hundreds and hundreds of different outlets and blogs and news platforms, whatever the case is. So it just is what it is. You're going to see your images all over the place in places where they most likely shouldn't be, and you price it accordingly, because that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah, so kind of to piggyback on that, essentially after having that discussion with Brian, one of the other things that came up was the idea of turning down work. And I don't know if some of you guys saw, I recently made a video where I said you should be okay with turning down work. But obviously there's a lot of nuances within that, right? Because one of the things that Brian and I talked about was, don't turn down work when you can use the money, and when it's just for this point of like holding up your principles, when like, what's the point? And I don't know if I'm articulating that very well, but essentially is like, Brian was kind of telling me like, hey, don't lose this job because you're like trying to nickel and dime for every type of usage licensing or whatever. Like, this is what they need them for. Like, they're paying you a good rate. Like, go ahead and take it. And I was already in that camp to begin with. Like, I included, marketing and advertising and PR stuff in my original quote. But to Brian's point, I think he was seeing, people, now that licensing is becoming a topic we're all talking about, which is great that we're all talking about it. It almost seems like there's some people that are putting their foot down and being a hard ass and like making sure that, they get paid for every little tiny thing. And I'm not saying that we should get stepped on or like let our work just fly free, but there needs to be some balance, and you need to set realistic expectations, and you need to accept quality work when it comes your way and they're willing to pay you several $1,000s. So maybe Brian, you want to talk to that point a little bit more as well?
Okay, I just want to add a really quick point, and because you kind of hinted at it, and that's that, like, we've been talking about a lot more, but oftentimes the conversation's happening in Facebook, and people are very comfortable displaying their toughness over text. But like, when we're not, I think we need to have conversations about these things. Like, are people really that hard-lined? Or is it just is it them trying to communicate their ideologies in the Facebook groups? Like, I think we should talk about this particular topic for a few minutes. Like, how does everybody feel about being flexible with those rates? Brian, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just want to interject that.
Yeah, no worries. I'll just say my piece quickly before whoever else is signed. Look, Adam, you articulated it pretty well, and you kind of said where we're going at. And my point to you, and I'll just say this out loud, was that I do see people at this point because there's so much information going around now, and people are so in tune with licensing that it's being like pounded on them to make sure you get your rates for licensing and all that, which I agree with. But I don't think you should do that at the expense of turning down a job when you need a job because you want to be a hard ass to your license, your usage license. And I'm not saying don't give away things for free. I'm not saying you should give away things for free, but be flexible in what you're doing to be able to get a job versus not get a job, as far as versus saying to someone, no, these are my terms. This is the usage you're getting. If you don't like it, sorry, go find someone else, because they will find someone else that can do it probably for cheaper, that is willing to give up more usage. And if you can use the money and it's a decent paying job, why turn it down? That's kind of where my head was at.
Was that Peter that was going to chime in?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with it when Adam said it. And I think that's the truth. I mean, like, when you work with a marketing department, especially now with a decent company, they get the rules, and sometimes they play dumb to see how far they'll let them go, but you can usually negotiate with them a reasonable rate. But I mean, if you work with a lot of designers, like I work with both, and I work with a lot of designers, and they need a lot of education. I mean, they're not paying my commercial rate, but at the same time, they got companies. Does anybody had any experience with circle lighting? Circle lighting is notorious for hitting up designers after they shoot. It's like, I got to educate designers. Fine. It's like, look, you're paying them for the product, and then you're also going to subsidize their marketing plan. I mean, and then they start to see it at that point, and then you point out that their aim is to have you basically endorse them, authenticate them with other designers. They're not putting it in front of your clients, potential clients, and they start to see it, but people are just a sucker for opportunities like that, because it's ego driven. And so even when people understand it and now they direct them to me more often, if I start telling, like, circle lighting, I'll happy to turn off. But if I start busting everybody for posting my images or reposting them, or if I find them on websites, then my clients, as much as they understand, they still get a little irritated, you know what I'm saying? And then they're not going to hire me. So like, there's a little bit of give in there. And I think just keeping everybody educated and keeping like a reasonable stance, you can always come back from a reasonable stance. But I'm going to agree that I'm not going to give anything up if I can't get exactly what I want. And I'm not going to play a hard ass, because there's definitely a person out there, and there's a cheaper person in everything Brian said, so I'm not going to repeat it, but I'm just repeating everything anyway. So that was my point.
So to that point, Peter, I think, when those instances happen where, you don't want to be a hard ass to your clients, you don't want to irritate your clients too much. A lot of times it's much more difficult to be in that position when you haven't had those conversations up front. And so if you have a new client that you're just meeting with for the first time, you're just starting to build a relationship, having those client conversations, managing their expectations in the very beginning and explaining all this stuff, educating them on this in the beginning is super helpful, so that when and if those things do happen, then they're not as irritated because they already knew about that ahead of time. So that's one point I always like to make. But again, when I understand what you're talking about as well, like if you've been working with somebody for a long time and you don't want to rub them the wrong way, you want to keep that relationship going, you want to keep those jobs coming from that person. So it's a tough line to toe for sure.
An opposing view on this particular topic that you can just chime in your thoughts on, not to start an argument, but just to toughen up the conversation a little bit. We've got Matthew Anderson, who I think you should probably, are you willing to share like your current situation right now? This is a big deal.
Well, I'm not a big deal, if that's what you mean.
You're a big deal, but I mean, you're sacrificing some pretty. Yeah,
I'm on a cruise ship, man. I'm on vacation. Jordan reached out to me and said, "Hey, you want to be on this call?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be on vacation, but I'm passionate enough about licensing. I need to be on this thing."
Yeah.
I wouldn't say opposing view on this. I think I'm getting a little bit of insight. I saw Adam chime in on something where Adam, you were kind of encouraging someone not to nitpick on someone, what they were going to use it for, which I agree. I actually saw both sides of this, and my response to that is not necessarily opposing, but depending upon what your market is, your average client, you should include that usage in what I consider a boilerplate license. The same way that no matter what kind of car you want to look for, they typically have different trim packages. They have their base, and if you want something more than that, you're going to pay more. If you want something more than that, you're going to pay more. So I think there was an instance where somebody on Facebook, Adam, you were chiming in, where someone was nitpicking about like, hey, it was on social media, but I saw them using it in a social media ad, and I didn't include that. And I'm like, well, I kind of see both sides of it, but at this point, paid advertising on Instagram is literally just hitting a button that says boost post. Mm-hmm. And now that crosses a threshold with paid advertising, so to speak. So I would say, if there's no one size fits all, that's for sure. And depending upon your clientele, just throw all that in your base rate. And then if they want something more than that, put a wording in your contract or something that says all other uses must be renegotiated. And yes, a big part of that is educating your clients, letting them know the bullet points of what's in the license and what's not, and say, hey, if you ever need anything beyond this, let's cross that bridge when we get to it.
To that point, I think you hit a key word about your payment. Make it worth your while. Like, my rates are, not the highest in the game by any stretch of the imagination, but my regular photography rates for my normal clients are solid enough that if they want to use the photos for X, Y, and Z, like, that's all included, and I feel comfortable with that. So if you hit the point where they're starting to use the photos for A, B, and C, but that's not included in your X, Y, and Z agreement with them, then either change your agreement or change your rates so that you feel more comfortable with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
I shot a job recently. It was for a hotel. They got me. I wanted the job because I needed to. It's a long story. I'm not going to get into it right now, but I wanted this job for various reasons, and I almost let them drag me, not through the mud, but they pretty much got everything from me, and I wasn't in a position to, I guess, stand my ground with this, like this, without being vague. So basically, I shot a boutique hotel, and they wanted 15 photos. And after we did it was an agreement over the phone. I didn't send them my actual agreement for various reasons. But after we basically had a virtual handshake deal on it, they were like, oh, by the way, we're gonna need a additional license for the designer. And oh, by the way, they also said their budget was only $2,000, which is like significantly less than what I would have charged for this. And then after that, they said, oh, we also need rights to be able to hand this off to the future hotel owners. We also need rights for it's like they kept on going. They kept on going. And it's like, again, I don't want to share the details as to why I was agreeing to all this. It's stupid. And in hindsight, I shouldn't have done it, but I did it. But like, how do you handle that? Like, I think part of the conversation too is like, it's not that some of us are necessarily afraid to lose the job, but like there may be some of us that are in a position where we need that job. And it's like, how do we balance devaluing the industry and what others might charge? And, I guess how do we balance that? I don't know. I know that's a big general open question, but I just for the sake of like furthering the discussion, how do you, I don't know.
It's
how do you
not too
balance
much
that?
for me to jump back in. I don't want to be the only one talking on here, obviously, but my thought is that you're not going to win them all. And there's enough jobs popping up in this industry all around the world that one botched up negotiation and licensing, deal isn't going to completely destroy the industry. And so I think you learn from it. You learn just like everything else, like you take from it whatever you can so that you can improve things going forward, and you learn lessons from the mistakes. And sometimes you might have to chalk it up like you did, Jordan, where you just say, damn, that sucks. I just gave away the farm for $2,000. Other times you might be able to, kind of remedy this situation just by being humble and just letting them know, like, hey, I didn't realize this is what was happening as it was happening, and now I have to put my foot in my mouth and let you guys know that I'm in a tough position here. Like, I screwed up. This is what's going on. Like, let's find a solution that both of us can live with. And I've said this in the past too. Like, I think so many times people in this industry, and I'm sure other industries too, but I only talk to people in this industry. Let's face it. But people are so it's almost like they're trying to look so professional to everybody, and like, we all don't know everything. Like, it's okay to like swallow your pride and tell a potential client or somebody that you're working with, like, I don't know, I want to go talk to somebody else about this and kind of figure it out. Like, give me a day to think about this, or hey, I told you this, but now I don't really feel great about it for these reasons, and this is embarrassing for me to say, or I feel weird coming back and telling you this now, or whatever it might be. But I think people would have to respect that. That's my opinion.
I'm going to chime in a little bit. I've been in a similar situation where I took a job and things snowballed a little bit beyond what I thought was the initial scope. So very similar to your situation, Jordan. And the way I approached it in terms of how do we not keep this going and how do we manage the situation and the industry, I just spoke to the client. I said, look, I'm going to honor our agreement, but this has evolved beyond scope and I want you to be aware. And when I invoiced them, I wrote down, I made a bullet point of all of the things that I should have charged. And then at the bottom, I made a discount line, special discount. So they were very aware there was a value they were getting, but they were not paying. So I was able to maintain that relationship with that client. That led to further work down the line. And that made the next conversation easier for me to charge what I should charge. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, if I were in the right state of mind, I probably would have had enough reason to be able to do something like that. I'm curious if anybody has taken the harder stance and said, no, this is how it is. And you were a little stronger in that.
Jordan, I would say there's a little bit of caveat to your situation, which happens a lot with hotels. Hotels are notorious for doing that. I shot for Marriott for years, and you do not give them your agreement, you sign their agreement. And I was very, very early on into my career, and I did not know the legal terms. And then by reading it, you are basically giving away the farm and saying, hey, you are not only allowing the hotel to use it, obviously Orbitz and Travelocity, which that's obvious, but like even their partners, the architect who designed it, the general contractor, the engineering company, like apparently they got that all in there. So hotels, in a way, it's like that's almost its own separate category. Yeah. Which it's unfortunate. It's kind of churn and burn. Hotels don't seem to be much of a relationship type. I don't know, type of interaction anymore. Because honestly, if they don't like you or your prices, they're just going to go with someone who's like $100 cheaper who doesn't read the terms and conditions.
Yeah, this one was just for the sake of putting it out there. This was for a developer.
Gotcha.
So it was like independently owned. But still, the designer was a licensee, so they wanted to have the additional license for the designer as well. But sorry, somebody was going to talk, and I.
No, it was me. I was just going back on the hotel thing. With kind of similar to what Mark was saying, I'm a Hilton photographer, and I shoot some Marriott, and you're definitely selling it all at once. So I mean, in a lot of this in our industry, from my experience, and I'm doing it for a while, is that just decide what you want for everything they're asking and put one. Like I talk to my buddies that are more shoot like with agencies and stuff on for ads, and in our industry, the like big developers, they're not gonna they skip the ad agencies, and they don't, there's no middlemen. So my feeling is just to always figure it all out, give them one price. Like they don't want to know, like in our industry, they don't want to know, like we rent equipment. I don't want to rent that guy a camera. He doesn't have his own camera. I don't want to buy him lunch. He doesn't want to buy his own lunch. If it's a travel gig, that's different. But if you start putting in meals on things on bids, I noticed that dudes at the top of these types of companies that are making decisions, they get real nitpicky about shit like that. Like, you know, like my bottom line is in the end that photography to a lot of people is just a favor and they treat it too simply. And so I've just learned that the best thing to do, and someone said it earlier, is just settle on what you'll take for everything they're offering. And I don't try and break it down anymore, you know? Like the more I break it down, the more they nitpick. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I know they're going to take it. I know they're going to give it all, but I don't have access to all those people. And that does rub me the wrong way, to the architect and all the different people that they might give it to. But at the same time, I've been able to resell to different like furniture manufacturers, designers, and I have made stuff on it. But I mean, I'm at the end, I'm not necessarily really into relicensing and chasing that business. So I don't have a problem with that. So I guess that's probably part of it too. Like if you're okay with it and you can settle on the price and you're good with it, then that's, you know, the flag hotels, you know, the big hotel brands. But and the other thing I was going to say is the brands themselves are kind of unfriendly. But if you get in good with a property, an actual property, or like a sales and marketing person that moves around, I've created some really good relationships that way. So and they become more respectful, and then you're, you know, like the more in any of this, the more that you hang on to clients and continue to educate them, you can push them along and get what you want out of it. You know, I'm learning that, and I used to be really scared until Jordan Clubhouse, and I started really talking to other photographers. And just this last year, I've really gone out and dropped the anchor, and no one's really batted an eyelash. I mean, you know, I've raised my prices, and everybody agrees. I mean, we're paying more at the store, right? We're paying more at Trader Joe's, so why can't we, you know, charge more? You know, paying my crew more. Does that make sense? I'm just rambling.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think that last point you just made, like everything else is increasing in price, our rates should also increase. So I think that's a good point. I don't want to
asking about people that have kind of taken a hard stance. And I've got an example. I don't know if it's exactly in line, but I think fair enough. A client a potential client of mine reached out to me. It was a company that I had identified as somebody that I really wanted to work with. I had just moved to a new area, a new market, and I was trying to get new clients. I sent a couple cold emails. They went unanswered. And I just mailed them my portfolio book in snail mail. He got the book in the mail. He called me. He's like, "Hey, man, you know, I just got your book. Your stuff's phenomenal. I have a shoot I would like you to do. It's actually of a retail store, different one than we just talked about, ironically, at the same mall, sidebar." But he was like all excited, and it was like he was just so gung-ho and like wanted to hire me immediately on the spot. And his excitement and kind of the quick movement of it all essentially forced me to not have the normal conversations that I would with my clients in the beginning, before we shoot, before we work together. That kind of lays that foundation of like what they are licensing the photos for, and what, you know, my rules are with my basic license. So he's like, "Hey, meet me over at the mall like tomorrow," or, you know, it was a pretty quick kind of turnaround. We'll kind of look at the store, we'll have a chit chat. And normally I wouldn't go to a location or quote unquote scout without a payment first. But I sort of treated this like little mall visit as our first in-person meeting, because, you know, normally I would meet with a client in person before we ever do a shoot anyway. So it was a way for us to meet face to face. Went there and did that. And again, he was all excited. He was like, "Yeah, let's book the shoot. We can get in here like, I don't know, next week or whatever." Again, fast moving. I neglected to have that conversation that I normally would about what his license is going to entail. After I delivered the photos and he got the final invoice, then he finally read the, you know, license usage. And he's like, "Wait, I can't give this to the store. I can't give this to the mall and the whatever and the whatever." And so then I had to backtrack and say, "This is what it, you know, entails." And we went back and forth for quite a while. And, you know, I can't remember if it was phone calls or emails, but, you know, I tried to ask him what his needs are. What do you need the photos for? What are your goals? What would you like to do with them? Who exactly would you like to have them? Like, how can we reach an agreement that we're both happy with? And in the end, he basically said, "I'm not going to be able to work with you if this is how you do business." And I said, "Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to be able to work with you if you expect to be able to give the photos to everybody for this price." And, you know, I had told him, if you pay this price, then you can give the photos to everybody. That's fine. But we both agreed that we weren't going to work together. So.
But in fairness, Adam, it sounds like you're saying, but he wasn't aware of any of this beforehand. So it's partially your fault.
Absolutely.
So I might go back to saying what you said before, like, all right, I screwed up, take them, use what you need them for because it was my screw up, but going forward, this is the way it's going to be, versus being a hard ass after the shoot already happened. You're trying to get the money from them.
Well, maybe that's a good way to look at it. And maybe I could have done it that way for that particular shoot. Although the rate sheet that I sent him and the deposit invoice that I sent him did have those terms on it. It just wasn't, verbally discussed. And, it didn't sound like, even if I had done it for this time, it didn't sound like he would want to use me again for the next time based on those rates and usage terms. But maybe, I don't know, like to your point, like maybe if I would have just said, you know what, hey, I screwed up this time, take him and run. Maybe he would have used me again and played ball. I don't know.
I think a lot of it just boils down to education up front. And I learned that actually the biggest from Adam's course and personal experience too.
Yeah.
Is just, and it is kind of a somewhat awkward situation to have up front. But as time goes on, if you just let them know, yeah, for this rate, you have my standard licensing usage, like social media, website, blah, 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 whatever you normally include. And then if you get a little pushback on it, a key question I have asked people is asking them, if you get not necessarily tension, but like there's some difference in what you want, they want, asking them, how familiar are you with licensing and photography? And the key word is asking them how familiar, not are you familiar? Because most people, when you ask them how familiar, they'll go, not very. And there's your chance to educate them. But yeah, I've lost clients. I met a couple times with interior designers who we ran scenarios. And they're like, yeah, I'm so excited. Yeah, if XYZ furniture company wants to use that photo, just point them in my direction. And they go, oh, so I can't give it to them? And then we explain it. Never use me. Never call me back. And I would rather have that happen than them hire me, not educate them. And then we have some sort of tussle over Instagram or email or something. So now I've learned from personal experience and Adam's course specifically, it's education up front. It's awkward. It's not always the funnest conversation, but it has to be done.
I agree. It can be awkward, but the more you have the conversation and the more confident you are in talking about it, the more you truly know it, understand it, believe it, the easier it's going to roll off the tongue. Because if a designer is having a conversation with a homeowner, and that designer is not going to have a problem telling them like, oh, this is when you pay me at this milestone, I'm going to get this much money. Like that's just how their business works. And this is how our business works. And it's just that lack of education, lack of experience or confidence that kind of puts us in that position. But I will quickly share on the other side where I did give in, actually, because Brian just reminded me, nobody's perfect. We're all constantly learning. Another client, when I first moved here to Hawaii, we had a meeting in person. I really felt a good connection. I thought, man, this is my go-to guy. Like he's going to be one of my bread and butter clients. First job I did with him was just, a house remodel. I think it was like 10 photos or something. And our agreement was that the builder, he was the architect, there was a builder that was going to cost share on the photos. And he's like, you know what, we do a bunch of work together, I'll just cover the cost on his end. And they're like, cool, like if you want to gift him the photo, that's great. I can't remember how the conversation went, but basically when he got the final invoice, he was like, wait a minute, this is much higher than I anticipated. Like, I don't know if I'm, didn't do a great job of explaining my rates or giving him a solid quote, or I don't know where the miscommunication was. Like I was totally thrown off guard. I thought I had done everything I possibly could to make sure he knew how much he was going to be paying. And at the end of the shoot, he was like, wait, what? This is way more than I want to pay. And we were on the phone and I was going back and forth of like, it's in the email, it's in the rate sheet, it's on the deposit invoice. Like, I don't, it was on the quote, it was in all these places. I don't know what else you want me to do to help you understand that like you had agreed to X, Y, and Z. And basically he said, you know what, Adam, I can pay this, I can afford this, but if I do, it's going to put a real bad taste in my mouth. And I don't know if we're going to work together again after that. And at that point I sucked it up and I was like, you know what, take them, pay what you think is fair. And let's do business again in the future. And he has hired me a couple more times since then.
So we've got 29 people on the call. We've been going for about 30 minutes. If everybody's okay with it, you don't have to tag me or anybody if you don't want to, but feel free to share this in your stories so that other people can join. We're still going to be going for at least another hour. So, and not everybody has to stay on. I'll probably be sharing this later because I think it's an important conversation. So please share the link to the Zoom call in your stories, just so people know to come if they want to join. Again, you don't have to tag me or anything like that. It's not about that. I do want to open it up though, because I think we got a good conversation started. We've got 29 people in here, and I'm guessing that everybody came in here because, not everybody, but I'm sure a lot of you came in here wanting to learn. Maybe you've got something on your mind that like you've been thinking about, or you want to hear about in particular, you were hoping to hear about on this call. Like, I'd invite anybody to just jump in and share a thought. There's somebody who hasn't chimed in yet. Somebody, if you've got a thought or something you wanted to open a discussion on, feel free to hop in and do that now. We'll give you a minute to gather your thoughts.
I've got a quick thing that kind of relates to what we've been talking about. I think the sweet spot for sure is verbally going over those contracts and how things, work as far as licensing. But I know for me, I kind of sometimes easy to get caught up in the excitement of
Hey, Michael,
for the first time and really focusing. Oh, there's a couple people here that have.
Michael, really quick, you're cutting out a bit, so maybe try pausing your video, turning your video off, or like pausing your downloads or uploads, just to see if we can get a audio only for a minute.
Yeah, is that any better?
Give it a shot. We'll see.
Okay, but I was curious if anyone's had any success with video education being passed along to clients as a real thing to kind of look at, other than yourself explaining everything in detail beforehand, if you don't get to it.
I've shared Matthew's video recently, several times actually. I have it. So for my real estate photography business in Minnesota, I actually, as part of our terms, I linked to his video to watch. At one point, I made my own video just to send to clients, because I actually made a video directly because one of my clients said Jordan doesn't know what he's talking about in terms of licensing. So I made my own video years ago, and I put it on YouTube and I shared it to my clients. I don't know if it was successful or not, but I'm using them because it's just extra reinforcement. But yeah, anybody else have any experience with that?
I'm curious, Jordan, after you've sent Matthew's video to clients, have they said anything about it or given you any feedback or anything?
Just who's the guy with the beautiful hair and the nice setup?
That's what I would expect. Like,
Yeah.
how did he get so handsome? How does he get his hair like that? That's typical responses.
No, honestly, nobody said anything, to be honest with you. And the truth be told, I don't know if they are watching it, but I think just even the fact that you're willing to put a link to kind of reinforce a thought can be helpful, because they may say, I'm not going to deal with that. I'll just trust them, take his word for it. So no, I haven't had any direct feedback that anybody's watched those.
I've been using both videos. Jordan, I've been using yours for years until Matthew came out with his. Sorry.
It's better.
Hey, it's better.
Better.
But no, I've been using it also, and I haven't got much feedback except for one client that did respond back, and they told me that now they get it. They understand. So if anything, Matthew, you educated one person out here in New York, but
that works, man. It did its job.
Exactly. But yeah, use them. I think look, video is king now, as everyone knows, and having a point of reference from somebody that's different than yourself explaining to them, because none of my leads that are inquiring by me in New York know Matthew or Jordan. So if I'm sending something from another photographer that's somewhere else in this country, it goes away, and it kind of enforces the fact that these are laws and these are rules. This is not just me trying to be a hard ass.
So Matthew, it's okay if we send a link to our clients to watch your videos?
Oh, by all means. Yeah,
okay.
That's the whole purpose. Yeah, I mean, I won't go into it too much, but I know if you type in copyright infringements and licensing, a lot of it is there to educate photographers.
Yeah.
And, again, as photographers, we're creative people, and not every creative person is also the best public speaker. So sometimes it's kind of an uneasy situation sometimes. So that's why I did it. It's like, well, instead of educating photographers, let me just make a video talking directly to the clients, not being a jerk about it, but being fairly firm and saying, hey, here are the facts. And so basically throw me under the bus. I'll do the speaking
Yep.
for you if you're not comfortable doing it.
Yeah, I watch them once in a while. I watched the one about reposting the other day. I've seen it, I've watched it many times. I just like it for reinforcement for myself, and
The social media
Only-
specific one.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I've been
I'm
tempted to send
surprised
it
that
to
one
people.
didn't get as much traction, but whatever.
Yeah, but that's something I have the biggest problem with is interior designers
Yeah.
letting furniture companies have images, and they think that it's promoting them. They think it's good for their business, and they think it's PR for them.
Use 'em.
But it's
Use 'em.
not. I just included in my contract that a photo credit is not an accepted form of payment. And this was in talking about social media, explaining if a company anyone else wants to use the picture, they need to come to me. And if a company asks for a hashtag, asks for permission with the use of a hashtag, that is not allowed.
I put that in my contracts too.
Yeah.
Specific to like hashtags or mentions, little URLs. It's like basically legal verbiage of going, that doesn't count.
No.
I think that's good to have in your contracts. I've never considered that, but I think that's really smart.
Yeah.
I
And
recently-
I've lost some business because some designers don't like that. But you know what? I have to stand by it. Why should one client do the right thing and one not? And the one person client, a new client, I shot 2 projects for her, and I thought, I explained the terms to her, then I gave her the agreement, she signed it, returned it to me, and then the next week she gave let a company have the pictures, and she had this big conversation with me about how important it is for companies to tag her in building her business. And I thought, wow, this is going to be smooth sailing with her, because she was a lawyer and she just doesn't get it. But she was a criminal defense lawyer, so she doesn't get it.
So I recently had a conversation with my attorney about it. The tagging of product on designers' photos when they're posting our images and they're tagging companies. And I asked him, can that be construed as an invitation to repost or to reuse the image? Or if I were to tag those companies, is that an invitation? Does it represent permission in any way, shape, or form? He said, no, it doesn't. So that's something I've been telling my clients. They can tag whoever they want. That's not an invitation and it's not permission. It's okay for them to want to bring attention to their work from other people. That doesn't necessarily mean that the extra step is part of the package. They don't have to give permission for that repost. So that's something, just wanted to mention that came up in conversation with my attorney.
To add
So
to
what
that
I have
point-
read is there is implied permission and there's explicit permission. Implied means like, oh, they got tagged. Maybe, does that mean they want me to repost that, or do I take it that it's okay to repost? So, and then another question I have, and I don't know if anyone can answer this, is does the person who posts, does the Instagram user own the copyright to their post? Which I think might be the case. They own the copyright to the post, the photograph and the text as a compilation, like a magazine owns the copyright to a magazine. That includes photographs, copyrighted photographs. But the photographer obviously still owns the copyright to the photograph. So if someone gets permission to repost a post, is that okay? And the photographer has nothing to say about that. So I'm not sure. I think I have read that an Instagram user owns the copyright to their post. But a lot of times when I see a photograph reposted, it's not along with the text, the original text. So it's that they're taking the photograph and writing their own new caption.
Yeah, to that
So-
point, I think a lot of it goes back to the Instagram terms of service, because
Yeah.
screenshotting and reposting an image is not part of the Instagram platform. That's why
Right.
people have to screenshot. So Mariella, Muriel, is that your name, Muriel?
Muriel?
Yes.
To your point, you know, when you're talking about it's not permission, it's not giving them authority to repost. In part of that conversation, I always like to say reposting to or share to stories using the little airplane icon. That's part of Instagram's platform. That's encouraged because that's a direct link back to you. So I kind of work that into
Yeah.
the conversation as an alternative and something that's encouraged, and like, hey, this is great because it is a direct link back to you and it's not infringing on anybody, and we can all be happy with this, you know. So I include that like in my DM if I'm, you know, sending it to somebody that's posted without permission. I say, hey, I'm glad you liked the photo, but you know, you didn't have permission. Please take it down. If you want to share the stories, that's okay. So there's that option as well.
And to that same point, I'll say this is a little bit how I've explained to clients recently about sharing and about how a manufacturer reposting their photos not really bringing them business. I tell them, look, if they're using the photo to sell their product, that's not promoting you. If they're sharing their posts to your store, to their stories, that's linked directly to you, that's promoting you. I'm okay with that usage. You're my client. I want you to succeed. I'm okay with that usage. But when they're reposting the photo they stole from your feed saying, we love how our chair model, blah, 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 retails for this much, here's the link, was used by this designer, that's not promoting you.
I think that's a
selling their
really good
product.
point. That's a really good, Adam, don't you include something like that in your, or I feel like somebody I'm friends with includes that. So basically part of the license agreement. What is it? Or was it? Oh, it was actually Jen, I think. Was it you, Jen, that was talking about? So
She
not
just
to
posted something in the chat, so maybe it's her.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was Jen. Not to call you out, Jen, but didn't you include something like you changed your pricing around to where it includes social media? Or can
Yeah, no, I made kind of like an add-on fee for you know, if people want to share photos from a shoot or have them reposted by vendors. I mean, it was just kind of like a random fee like I came up with. It was $450 for the shoot. And I mean, I don't know if that's the best way to do it. I've had several people who got use out of it, got a lot of use out of it. And then I've had other people kind of push back against it and say you should just raise your price and not have this stupid add-on, because they psychologically, I mean, I've been told psychologically, like they don't want to pay extra, but like if it's included and raised, it's easier for them to swallow for some reason. So
that's a good point.
So I still don't know the answer. It is a long process of educating, and so I put in my contracts now that, you know, I have a line about, you know, you can't share these with subcontractors, vendors, and including via social media, and then I have them initial that, so to make sure they read that part, but I don't know that they actually do. You know, I've had people tell me they simply just don't read the contracts, so you can only do so much. But what I posted in the chat was actually from Instagram Help Center, and if you scroll down to where is it? There's copyright and posting content, and something about reposting. Shoot, I lost it now.
I mean, it says you can only post content to Instagram that doesn't violate someone else's intellectual property rights.
Right. Yes. And then also talks about where okay, I forgot what I was pointing out here. But anyway, I mean, Elaine, sorry, you were talking about, does owning the copyright of a post constitute like, oh, it's okay for someone to repost this? And I don't believe so, especially on Instagram. It's not even a native function of Instagram to
Right.
repost. So people are, definitely like screenshotting or downloading images and reposting them that way, and have to recopy the caption and everything. So there's actually like effort into like stealing photos on Instagram.
Right,
because-
but if you use one of the reposting apps,
Yeah, but I
and-
don't,
and if they
I-
get permission from the original poster, let's say the interior designer, if they get permission, so I'm thinking like technically in a court of law, does the poster own the copyright to their post?
No,
I
I
think
The entirety of the
yeah,
post.
I'm reading the terms that Jen put in here, and it's pretty clear that no, they don't. Like you pretty much need to have a license, and it basically
Yeah, I
says it
think,
says even if you tag them, you could still be violating their copyright.
and I
And
think those third-party apps have nothing to do with Instagram, so
Right.
that it's not Instagram's legal,
Right,
anything to do with it. It's just like
yes,
some random app that
right.
I'll
probably
chime in with-
violates your copyright in every sense of that. So I don't think so.
So
Yeah.
I'll chime in with the legality of it. For them to own the copyright of something, there has to be a creative process for it. So for them to have the copyright of a post with your photo, they would need permission in your license to create derivative work with your image. So if you want to assume that it is possible to own the copyright of a post, what I would suggest is to include in your contract, within the limitations of your license, that they are not allowed to create derivative posts or sorry, I can't get it out.
Derivative works.
Derivative content from or copyrightable derivative. So it depends on your licensing terms, but you might want to specify that.
But that would mean that they can't use your photograph in a post with text.
Or you can just be really specific, because if you're telling them they can't create derivative content, we're talking about derivative content that could be copyrighted, right? Because inevitably they're going to create something with that image. They're going to create a brochure, they're going to put it on a website, they're going to create a post. They're going to create multiple things. Are those things copyrightable? In some instances, yes. In some instances, no. So you could say your marketing license includes, brochures, marketing materials, excluding, Instagram post. You can't copyright your Instagram post. Something to that effect. I would suggest actually discussing it with a copyright lawyer. But in all, full disclosure, I used to be an attorney, not a copyright attorney, but that's how I know about derivative work. And that's why I asked about the intent in the post and what it meant when you're tagging someone.
You were harboring your little secret over there this whole time.
Not anymore.
But
So-
when they have already made, if they're using it as on Instagram with a caption, then they've made a derivative work. So I think, just like I was saying, you cannot allow reposting. Cannot allow reposting. You cannot grant someone if they ask for it. All inquiries have to go back to you.
And I have a clause like that at the end of my contract, and I make them initial that section that says they cannot give access to my images to any third parties. And I specify, and I even say, which I've never enforced, but I even say they have to pay a penalty per image if they do.
Mm-hmm.
I have never enforced it. I don't intend to do it. For me, it's more of a pay attention. There's money involved if you do this.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has ever reacted against that clause, but it hasn't stopped the resharing either. So that's why I have a copyright attorney.
So just for the second time, we've been going on this Instagram specific topic for a while, and it's a good conversation, but I just want to make sure if there's any other things that topics that people want to discuss around licensing, to give them some room to bring it up. Anything in particular that people wanted to come onto this call to learn about or talk about or anything?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So copyright licensing is a new thing that I'm starting to kind of get, I guess, be backed into a corner and, start to play with now. There's a lot of real estate stuff, so simple and easy, but now I'm getting pushed into, falling into doing more development work. Some builders and stuff like that. Recently did an interior designer. But my question, I guess, is kind of, listening to Matthew talk about different levels and stuff like that. How would you break this down? I would say like my base is just, social media, marketing purposes, just a standard real estate thing. But pushing out of real estate, how would you segregate these things out? And
that's a good question.
I guess the biggest thing is like what everyone wants to know is like the charge. That's where I'm trying to I don't know what the industry standard is. I don't know if I'm way too low.
I don't know if anybody knows what the industry standard is, to be honest with you, Corey. I mean, it's kind of, you'll hear different schools of thought. I mean, I don't want to speak for Adam, but I'll let Adam share his thing and I'll let Matthew share his as well. But I do know specifically that there are people out there that are charging significantly more than what the average photographer is charging. And for some of us, it's not realistic. Adam, the interesting thing about Adam is he has firsthand experience as being somebody on the other end who was licensing photos from photographers for a manufacturer of a product. So he's got unique experience from there, from that angle of things. So, I mean, and anybody else should definitely chime in as well. But those are two very good questions that I think are still up in the air and are for the entire industry, to be honest with you. The videos that AP Almanac that Matthew and Mike Kelly just put out are very valuable around that topic. And I'm pretty sure you guys even break down the way you price for things. I don't know how much detail you go into. I don't remember, but
I don't think we got into the specifics, but Mike on average charges about 400 per photo. Now the difference is Mike's in a very different market too, and the type of people who are asking for his photos more than likely know he's not going to be cheap. I'm somewhat similar, but I have two tiers of licensing. So one is if I shoot something for a builder and maybe little old lady installs blinds, motorized blinds, or designs them or something. She's a one-person show. I charge her about 150 per photo. That's it. And then with the standard rates and stuff, some photographers probably think that's extremely expensive, and I'm sure there's probably someone here that thinks that's extremely low. That's just the range that works for me. And then my other tier is like if some residential architect or Kohler faucets or some national manufacturing company or something asks for a photo. On average, I'm charging about $375 per photo. So I'm a little bit under what Mike charges, but not by much. So if someone's asking for, if Delta Faucet asks for like 4 photos, I mean, I don't need to work that day. So, it's great. But that's my numbers. And more than likely, it's probably going to change and go up at the beginning of next year. So
Adam, can you share your perspective on those as well? I know this is kind of your area of expertise, one of them at least.
Yes, but I'm a little confused. It sounded like Corey was talking about charging for an actual photo shoot, not for a licensing fee after the fact.
So yeah, so I guess, with after Matthew talking, my next question to him was going to be like, okay, so you're charging X per image. Is that including license? For me, for example, like if I'm going to, so for the interior designer.
So Corey, you're asking about being commissioned directly by these clients, correct?
Yeah. So the interior designer that I recently shot for, I charged her $250 for like license and then $75 per photo. I think she came out with like 7 photos. So, I was happy with it. She was happy with it. She was like, yeah, that's reasonable compared to what I'm seeing around here. But I'm just trying to get a feel, that's one person of many people that I'm going to come across over time. But that session or whatever you want to call it, and then an image fee. So you talked about image fees. Now, is that including your license, or is that separate on top of that and even towards Adam?
Yeah. So Corey, when you asked that question, I think Matthew understood it to mean licensing photos after you've already done the shoot. So the number that he was just saying,
Correct.
he's talking about, if a
After
company
the
comes
fact.
to him after the shoot's done, then that's what he charges per image for, a
Yeah,
standard
sorry if I
license.
confused you, Corey. That's not what I meant to do.
So
I thought
Corey,
that's what the question was too. I kind of led you down that hole. So sorry, Matthew. I sabotaged you there.
Dang it, Jordan, man.
So Corey, to someone like you that's kind of just transitioning from real estate into, the more architecture design side of things, you're trying to figure out your pricing. This is something I see a lot. And actually, I see two people here, Anton and Matt, that I've actually both worked with personally to sort of figure out how they want to structure their prices. And typically, we see a couple of main ways that people in this side of the industry do things. They either do an hourly rate, a half day or a full day, and then you have the creative fee plus a licensing fee. So that's like 3 different styles of pricing photography in this genre that we're talking about. I personally do a creative fee plus a licensing fee per image. So kind of like what you just talked about, like the creative fee is the price to show up with my camera gear. And then the licensing fee obviously is per image on top of that. That's what I encourage people to do. But it doesn't work for everybody. And I think it's kind of nuanced to your shooting style, how you want to run your business, how you want to shoot and edit your images, the kind of service and offerings that you want to have for each of your clients. So to give you some actual numbers, just to think about, when I switched from real estate to doing this type of work, I started at $500 for the creative fee and $50 per photo on top of that. Later, after getting a little bit better, getting a little more experienced, I bumped it up to $750 and $75, and then $1,000 and $100. Currently, I kind of have 2 tiers. The smaller firms are paying $12.50 for the creative fee and $100 per photo, and the larger firms are paying $17.50 for the creative fee and still $100 per photo. So, it can range higher than that. It can go lower than that. Depends on your market, depends on your skill level. But hopefully those numbers and that explanation gives you a little something to think about. But whether it's with Jordan or with another person, it might be helpful to, book a one-on-one consulting call to really hash out your own business model, because I don't think you can really make a push into doing that kind of work if you don't have a solid grasp on how you're going to get paid for that work.
Corey, where are you based?
Exactly.
Where are you based out of, Corey?
Montana.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. So, are you Missoula real estate photo or?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. I'm trying to think. I can't remember who else is out in that area. I feel like Nathan, is it Satran or?
Yeah, I think I don't know if he's still doing stuff. I know he closed up real estate from my understanding.
Okay.
He was actually married to my wife's cousin. So that's how I know him.
Got it. I just don't know anybody else out there that you could compare rates to or compare notes to. And I'm not really sure what that market is like, but yeah, it's gonna, I don't know, like it's still a thing that I struggle with. And to be honest with you, I don't want to spend too much time talking about like what we should charge for our shoots, just because I want to kind of keep the conversation topical.
Yeah, and we can push away from that. So kind of pushing away from that is like, talking Adam, he had the 2 price points for larger firm or whatever. That package, is that just social media and just standard advertising? Like, how are you separating the usage out? How are you making different levels there?
Yeah, good question. I include everything in my standard license. So currently, if you're using the photos to market and or advertise your company, then it's fair game. I think that's a little bit unpopular opinion in the industry. A lot of people say it can be used for marketing, but not advertising. So what's the difference? Like advertising, you pay for it, right? If it's put in a newspaper, if it's put in a magazine, if it's on a billboard, that's paid advertising and you should get paid more for that. And I actually and I think Matthew Anderson spoke to this a little bit earlier, because we sort of had this little back and forth on one of the Facebook groups recently, and Mike Kelly even chimed in. And when I said my opinion on that, he basically said like, hey, Adam, at some point you can't be okay with that. Like at some point you have to start charging more for this. And my response was, at some point I probably will, but I don't think I'm there yet. And with a recent job that I had last month, I might have been there and not really realized it yet. And so I really need to start paying attention now, because I worked with a big national corporation who cost shared with 2 other big national corporations. Prior to that, 99.9% of all of the people that I'm dealing with are very small, very local, not even really regional. And currently I live on an island that's pretty fucking small. So they're not advertising in Dwell magazine. They're not putting ads in Lux, whatever. They're not in House Beautiful. And the way that I looked at it, and the way the reason why I'm able to justify that I'm okay with that, of giving up those advertising rights, is that there are a lot of free places that companies can use these photos. There's Pinterest, Houzz, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Google Business, Yelp, email campaigns, like portfolios on their website. There's lots of places they can use these images. 9 out of 10 times, probably 10 out of 10 times, if you look at where they're actually using the photos, my clients, they're on less than 50% of those free applications. So if they're not even really utilizing them to their fullest, but they decide they want to run one ad in the local magazine that's just here on this island of 1 million people, then you know what? I'm going to let them run that ad. And so again, when my work levels up to the point where I'm now working with international corporations that have big dollars, and they are going to be running ads in Dwell and these other magazines, then I'm going to start taking another look at that. And thankfully, I'm at a place in my career where I think that's, right around the corner, and maybe I just had one and didn't realize it. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. And again, I know that's slightly unpopular opinion, but I feel like I have a pretty good explanation and reason that makes me feel comfortable about it. And again, my rates are such that I feel like I'm getting paid fairly for the work and the images.
I would say that I understand kind of where you're coming from. It's, for me, stepping into something new, I can see myself, being happy with some things and just building myself up, taking those steps upwards, and slowly growing that like you did from, 500 up to your 1250. Now, one thing that you kind of pointed out, and I know Jordan and I have kind of talked about this, it's been a while. And I don't know if anyone else, my question, you touched on the word, cost sharing, like, how does that cost sharing break down between 2 different people or 3 different people? Are you breaking down the per image fee?
I'm going to share my actual sheet. Can you see this?
Yep.
Cost sharing model. Okay. It's easier just to show you visually. So, and this is just an example. It's not necessarily my rate. It is my rate as of right now, but it might change depending on where I'm at. Typical project example.
I just have a quick question about like licensing individual images. Sometimes at the end of a shoot for a designer, I'll just, the designer will say, well, I just want some extra content, and I'll throw on like a 50 millimeter and run around and just do a bunch of close-ups, and they take like no time at all. Like, would you just give that as part of your just general creative feed? Say, you can just use these, like, you don't have to tag me. These are like just quick little snapshots. I just throw one little filter on it and I'm done with it.
At one point I would have, but not anymore.
Is that, Chris, for real estate or for a designer?
For designers.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, this is where the creative fee, licensing fee, and the hourly rate, I think they're 2 different business models. So I would never, ever, quote unquote, throw on a different lens and run around shooting quick snapshots. Like, I feel like that is the kind of work that I don't want to do. And so I specifically don't do that kind of work. So if somebody asks for that, I would tell them that's not what I do. Like, each shot that I put my name on is going to be produced the best way it can. Some of them take an hour and a half to produce one image. Some might take 3 minutes to produce one image. But regardless, I think it kind of looks like it's devaluing your work and your skill set. And if you do that, then all of a sudden you're like, wait, well, then why am I paying $100 for this one? Or, can I just pay you by the hour to run around and do this for 1 hour, and I'll have 50 photos? And, at that point, you're not producing quality work anymore. So I think it's a matter of asking yourself, what kind of business do you want to run?
Yeah.
If you're good at something, never do it for free.
So I'd love to hear from some people who haven't chimed in at all yet. Is that Jose Manuel? I see. There you
Hello
are.
guys, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
I'm trying to connect. It was a coincidence that I was with the telephone and I'm here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm glad you're finally able to make it to one. I'd love to hear your input on any of this.
Yes, a lot of it's so interesting to hear about all the topics. Right now, for me, I don't know if people knows about my work, but I'm working basically with magazines, with big magazines. I don't know if you feel in the same situation than me, but as a photographer, I feel that I'm in the middle of the magazines and in the middle of the clients. Nobody wants to pay the photographer. I don't know if you are working also with the public relations of the clients, that basically is the person who is running all the images and all the information of the designers. They always want to sell your work very cheap because they want to be cool to the client. I'm sorry to say that, but many people right now is assuming that you are not going to be paid because you have already been paid one time as a professional. No. Right now, I'm considering, if I don't know if somebody else is doing that, to increase my fees and trying to give the clients the license to publish in the magazines. Because honestly, magazines pays nothing. I don't know if somebody is working with magazines, but I think that right now, if you are not commissioned by Architectural Digest or if you are not commissioned by El Decor, a magazine can pay like $1,200 for a feature in a national spread. So that's nothing.
There is somebody that works with magazines that I'd love to hear from. Is Steve Magner here to witness this? Dan, would you mind chiming in about your experience working with regional magazines? Steve Magner and I have been dying to hear Dan Francis chime in. I think we're finally going to make this happen.
You good to go?
I've never been better.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dan.
All right, Jordan, you got me after a year and a half.
Yes.
So yes, I do work with a local magazine called Midwest Nest. So I don't know, where do you want me to start? I mean, I've been working with them for about 5 years. It's kind of like the Goldilocks zone, though. I mean, if I talk about this, you're not going to believe it, kind of thing. So I don't know if it's gonna help a lot of people, because it's a niche where they work with interior designers, architects, food preparation people, but I don't deal with that. I just deal with the interior designers and the architects. But I've been working with them for 5 years. They come out every month with an issue. But why I call it the Goldilocks zone is that they pay me well, they give me advertising, they let the people know that they can't use the images, they can't do screenshots of the images. So I work with them really well, where they tell me, like they give me about 3 jobs a month. And so today I was at like a fiber optic, kind of a building that was actually being worked on with a mid-century modern builder, which is always my forte of like trying to get in with architects. So it's this magazine. I mean, they work with architects every month. They work with interior designers every month. This next issue that is coming out is doing a design challenge. So they have let's see, they have 12 college interior designers. They have like 2 days to like design this area, and it gets voted on by the people and such. So that's like my in with the next 12 interior designers that are going to be graduating next year. But as an example of, I don't know if I can do a screenshot, but I've got this example. So it's like this magazine tells you like, I can give this to each customer that I photograph with. And it's just like a little, like, it's pretty thick in diameter, but it's just kind of a nice cardboard. And I can give this to each client that says like, hey, it'd be great. You know, we work with these local photographers. The rights of Midwest Nest, purchase photos rights, no screenshot, please. And then they have like, this is how to access these images. And I just put like my phone and email on there. So I give this to each client that I photograph. And that's worked out really well because I'll charge the magazine for the photo shoot for my time and travel if I need to go out to like the lakes area. I'm kind of in the Midwest, North Dakota, Minnesota, travel to South Dakota, Midwest, Minnesota, North Dakota. So if it works for me, it can work for you. I know it's just that I don't know how many magazines do this.
Dan, can I ask quick, just to clarify some things. So are you work for hire or are they contracting
work for
you
hire
and licensing? Okay. So they own, they technically own the images?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's not work for hire. I have my own, they hire me to go out and so it's independent.
So
no, they don't.
Are you licensing the images to them to use then, or what's?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Yep. So the only thing that was under the Midwest Nest rights, like it says these images are not owned by Midwest Nest, but we are given rights to use them strictly for editorial content, the magazine, social media posts, and advertising design within our pages. So if I'm photographing for an architect or a building, say a new building shows up, they can use those images for ads within their magazine. So no, they do not own the images. I charge them a pretty much kind of what you had, like a get out of bed fee. I'll go here, I'll do this shoot. I'll charge travel time along with mileage, because some of these shoots can be 3 hours one way, 3 hours the other way. So that's 6 hours in the car. So I'll charge a fee to sit in the car for 3 hours or 6 hours a day, and then mileage, and then also a photo shoot time. So most of these magazines, it's about 8 to 10 pages per story. So they only need, give or take, 15 to 20 images. So I'm in and out within probably, I tell the people maybe like an hour, hour and a half if I have to do portraits along with. So sometimes I might do the portraits of the architect, portraits of the interior designer, sometimes the contractor's there. Today it was supposed to be the architect, the construction person, and the owner of the building, but the architect was out for jury duty. So I have to redo it next Monday. But that's 3 pretty much networking events where I can just talk with 3 different people that I can license those images with. So I gave that little flyer to them today, and I'll probably get, because this is a brand new building, it just got released in June or July. So they haven't had a photographer come out there and capture it yet. So I'll probably for the Midwest Nest architect contractor.
So is your relationship with, so I guess just to like try to keep it targeted towards the licensing part of it. So you're essentially charging this magazine. I guess what I'm curious about is like, are you essentially giving them a deal by charging your normal rates, considering like their reach is?
Yep. Yeah, there is a little bit of a discount only because I do have a half-page ad in their magazine every month that says I do headshots in my studio and then I do architecture. So it's kind of a half-page ad that has my logo information. So I do give them a discount, but it's not like, I mean, the ad itself would have been about $800, $900 a month.
And they're sending you regular work on a monthly
every
basis
month. And cover shots pretty much if it has to do with architecture and interior design, it's a cover shot. If it's food, I don't deal with that. They have their own photographer for that. But yeah, there is a discount, but they don't say how much they pay me, and I don't tell the people how much I charge Midwest Nest.
You basically
Jordan.
Yeah, Jose, go ahead.
So then I will.
Oh, sorry.
No. I mean, I see. It's like strange for me. Sorry that my English is not like super amazing, but if you are interested, everybody to know about prices, that this is the thing that we are talking about, the reality of our situation. I'm always, the thing is that I'm always hired by the designers, always.
Can I chime in with a slightly different perspective as well?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
So just coming from my background, I worked for a BMX bike riding magazine. And at the time that I worked for them, they also had set fees based on whether it was a quarter page, half page, cover shot, back cover, whatever. So they had set fees. It was take it or leave it. Currently, the main magazine here in Hawaii is this one, Hawaii Home and Remodeling. It's pretty thin. It's given out for free. There's like stacks of them at hardware stores and different stores and whatnot. But this is a totally different type of magazine than either Dan or Jose was talking about, because it's an advertorial based magazine, meaning this image is on the cover because the architect of this house paid for it to be there. So in my licensing rates for this particular magazine for local companies that want to advertise here, that's included for advertorial, meaning if they want to run an ad in a different magazine, which there's not really any other magazines here, there's like one or two others maybe, but I include that in there because again, they're paying for it to be there. And I understand that that's the business model of this magazine. And again, if one of my clients is running a feature in there, they're probably not using the photos all the other places that I mentioned before. So it's just another different type of business model. So I think, Jordan, what you're talking about of like all this being insightful and like, how do we do it? I don't know if you can answer that question. How do you do it unless you understand the business model of that particular magazine?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So when I first moved here, I, asked for a meeting with the magazine and had a little Zoom interview meeting, whatever, with, I can't remember if it was like assistant editor or, whatever it was, creative director or something, just to understand how they work and operate, to see, should I be reaching out to them to pitch things? Should I, get hired by them? Like, what's their deal? So yeah, just another perspective on it.
We're probably going to go for another 12 minutes and wrap it up here. This has been a great conversation so far. Again, I'm probably going to do another one of these next month. And the topic of publishing is something that everybody's curious about. So maybe that'll be something we talk about. I'm not sure yet. But definitely let me know if you want to join these calls in the future. Dan said one topic that would be interesting would be to bring marketing people from architects and interior designers, people who look at RFPs every day and who hire photographers monthly. I thought about that, bringing architects in and just like allowing us to pick their brains a little bit. Marketing people. There are some people that I've recently, in fact, every job that I've gotten this year has been from either a PR firm, a marketing person, or either a PR firm or a marketing person. Like, I've not been hired by one architect or builder or designer directly. So to get their perspective would be interesting.
I have to say that maybe 80% of my work comes from Instagram.
Interesting.
And the work that changed my life came from Instagram.
Can you briefly, like, just because we only have about 10 minutes left, but can you just briefly tell us, that in general, how that came about?
I know, Jordan, that you had already like a program about marketing, and I wanted to join, but it was impossible. But the thing right now is that there's a big difference between when Instagram was bought by Facebook and before and after. And before, there were the clients, the designers were there. And right now, behind a big name, there's always like a web manager, like a marketing girl, like a guy that is this young guy, the influencer that is running a firm. And when you are following a big name, it happens to me. I was following a name, and then you have this 700 hard. Yeah, love it. And then I start writing on Instagram. I took several accounts and I start doing, well, I love this image because this is this, I love this,
You're proactively interacting with them. Yeah.
Yes. And 1 year later, this designer that is right now one of the 5, it can be the biggest in the world right now, but it can be maybe the 5 biggest in the world, start following me. And after a year, I said, well, I love your work. I would like to meet you. And he said, okay, in 3 months in Paris at 11 in the morning in my office. And he never talked to me ever again. And 3 months later, I took a train because I was living in Europe. I took a train, I went to the office, and he was there. And the first thing that he asked me was to do a portrait of him. And after the portrait, they asked me for a project. And this project was amazing, amazing. What happened that Architectural Digest United States wanted to publish that project. And Architectural Digest United States wanted to send their own photographer to do the project. And the designer said, no, it's Jose who is going to take the project. And they said, okay. They called me, they made like an exam. They asked me, what is my background? What is my project? What I have been doing? And they agree. I shoot the project, and it was published in Architectural Digest United States. It has been in all the Architectural Digests in the world. And 2 of the images are in the book of 100 years of Architectural Digest. And this came from Instagram.
Can I ask, does having a medium format or large format camera have anything to do with it?
You know what happened, that when you are shooting and this is, we all are professionals, you know how to use our tools. And you know that you don't really need the medium format.
But I'm saying, does that create do you think that there's any kind of perception that you're creating amongst these clients that actually matters? Like,
but I don't know if other people in the group are in the same situation, but when you are shooting a house that is an 87th floor in Manhattan in front of the 87th floor in front of the Central Park in Manhattan, they check everything. The clients check everything. The owners of the houses really check you everything. So if you are with I know that it sounds stupid, but it's like that. It's the perception of when you are dressing amazing or when you are like a disaster. If you are wearing a camera, if you are having a camera that is a Canon, I have a Canon. And they say, oh, this is the camera of my son.
I understand. Yeah.
Then
it's perception management. Like you said, it's just how you dress as well. It's an accessory essentially.
And the biggest are the clients. The more are going to hit you. The more are going to, oh, you are the service. No, I don't talk to you because you are like.
Yeah, I understand.
It's very difficult. It's not that shiny thing of. But no, the camera doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but it does help with perception management.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Jose, for sharing what you did, and thanks, Jordan, for putting this all together. It's really great to get off I don't know, message boards and Facebook, things like that, and see actual faces, and especially thanks.
Well, I don't want to take all the credit. I want to, because Adam and me, Adam and Brian, we're all trying to coordinate this together. So I just happened to have the setup for it. So,
well, you created the Zoom meeting, and Adam, thanks for sharing your prices, and Jordan sharing your prices, and just that stuff about the magazine. So often I just get stuck in my head, and I don't know who said it, but it says, if you get stuck in your head, you're dead. So I'm just super grateful for, I don't know, all these people sharing their resources and their information and their time. So I just wanted to say thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for listening and joining the conversation.
I'm gonna hang out for 4 more minutes. So if anybody wants to speed round anything, let's do it.
You know what? I do have an actual question.
Sure.
Matthew had shared a tip or a trick, if you will, of asking your clients how familiar I can't speak now. How familiar are you with licensing? do any of you guys have any other tips or tricks that have seemed to be like simple questions that draw out, I don't know, goodness or information that you can educate?
Two things come to mind that are very small, nuancy things like that. This came up recently, and I can't remember where. It might have also been Matthew. He said that instead of a contract, he calls it an agreement.
Yeah, I've always called an agreement too.
Yeah, so that's a little nuancy thing. And then the other thing is specifically when turning down work, turning down price offers or whatever. Again, I don't remember where I heard this, but it kind of stuck with me, is using the word comfortable. I don't feel comfortable with this arrangement because there's something psychological about, like, people can't argue with how you feel, right? So if you tell them you don't feel comfortable with it, then it's like, ooh, I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable, you know, or as opposed to like, no, I just don't want to do this, or whatever it might be. So two small little things that came to mind.
I would highly suggest, I keep on recommending this book to everybody that I talk to, but The Win Without Pitching Manifesto is a book I would highly recommend. Like it should be on everybody's must read list. The Win Without Pitching Manifesto by Blair Enns. And it's essentially, it's a book on basically how to discuss pricing with confidence and not have to like pitch yourself. And using the things that he teaches, I've booked my highest paying jobs with no haggle. It's basically a way to simplify things for not only me and the client, but also give me more money. So I would highly recommend that book, and then use it, figure out a way to formulate what he says into your own business.
Yeah, I found that, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I found that trying to educate your client is a waste of time. I think it's a nice thing to consider, and maybe one day they'll think about it, but while they're trying to get the job done, they don't really listen.
Yeah, you don't do it while they're doing the job though. You do it, the idea is to do it ahead of time, and you don't want to overwhelm them with information. But if you can find simple ways to word things or position things, or stay in control of the conversation and also the outcome and the way things, I think the whole idea is to retain control over the entire engagement from start to finish.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would disagree on the waste of time thing. I think you can absolutely waste your time trying to do it, because it will go in one ear and out the other. If you're not doing it ahead of time, like strategically.
Did they give that much time?
Things are changing, eh? Things are changing. The clients know. The clients they know that they have to pay for the fees. They know that they are publishing fees. They know everything. All the people around our work, also the guys of the cabinets, all the clients, they know that they have to pay the licensing. And the thing is that sometimes they don't want to do it, but this is something that is changing slow and slow. So I think that we are all in a good path.
Oh, good. All right.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think that having those early conversations and making them really friendly with your customers can really make a big difference. I have clients that just tell me right off the bat, oh, I have this vendor that we used in this house. They know we're doing this photo shoot. They want to buy your licenses. They're selling them for me. But that has been the result of having these conversations, not in an aggressive manner, but just, carefully and slowly educating them always before the shoot. So I agree, things are changing. And I in my experience, it has been very, very productive to have those conversations.
And Matthew, I didn't mean to publicly disagree with you. I was just trying to offer a different perspective on it.
Well, I think the idea is the client likes to see one line item on the bill, right? And that makes everybody so comfortable, and they say, okay, cool. This is what it's going to cost me. That can move on. They kind of covered that before. Do any of you guys ever cover time limits on licensing?
Ooh, we didn't talk about that, but that would have been a good subject.
No.
I'm hesitant. Let's make this the last topic we chat about, just because we've been going for 2 hours. But this is something I wish we would have covered. Also, I just have to make sure to mention to register your images with the U.S. Copyright Office. There, I said it. If you need questions, look up Gary Gomez's video on YouTube. But yes, time limits on you're talking about like whether the license is in perpetuity or 10 years or 5 years. So that, is that what you're referring to?
Right. I work off 3 years and unlimited. I think you can make it whatever you want. But does anybody do that?
I heard at one point, I think it was Tony Roseland made the point where he on his agreement, he had the terms being for, I believe, 5 years, and he used that as a negotiating point. So if he wanted to, if the client didn't want to pay his rate or whatever, or he was getting haggle about it, he could say, I'll tell you what, how about I increase it from 5 years to 10 years? Or 10 years to in perpetuity.
Right.
So like he was using that as a negotiating point, and he was intentionally starting it off relatively low and then using it as a negotiating point. On the other hand, things are changing a little bit. Like I'm never, and maybe I should, maybe I'm doing a disservice to the industry by not paying attention to that, but I'm not going to go and ask them for him to pay me another licensing fee after 5 years or 10 years. It just sounds nickel and diming, like I'm nickel and diming them and that I'm picky. I see a lot of people shaking their heads yes. I don't see anybody shaking their head no. But I imagine somebody may have another different thought on that.
The good thing of everything that we are talking right now is that we are all together. And this is one of the things that I think is key, that the clients know that things are changing. The clients know the condition of the photographers right now. They know. The thing is that they think that we don't talk to each other. So they think that I can sell this thing with one, I can do this with another one. And then when they realize that we are all together, then is when things change in the industry. And I think this is the important thing of that we are talking right now.
No, I've never done any kind of time limit. Back in the BMX days where it was a little bit more advertising based, most of my licenses was for one specific use of the image. Where it was a lot more what we call rights managed, where it's like, okay, you're going to print this on a set of posters to be distributed at this year's X Games, and that's it. Like you're never going to use a photo for anything else again, and the price is this amount. But in the architecture space, I don't put any time limits on it. I just can't imagine a scenario in which a architect or a firm or designer would say, you know what, it's been 5 years, I want to keep it on my website, let me go pay again. It just doesn't seem very likely, and it would feel very awkward to me to come knocking at their door asking for it. And honestly, to me, it just doesn't feel fair. I do like the idea of using it as a negotiation tactic. I think that's pretty clever. But yeah, I just can't see that going over too well. And again, if you price your services to where you feel comfortable getting that amount for what you're giving up, then I don't think you can argue with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the negotiation part is probably the magic of it, right? Like if you can squeeze somebody for double for a time frame that you're never going to enforce, why not take it? But then, 5 years down the line, where are you going to be trying to find the image that they're using somewhere?
Pixie will help you find that stuff. Yeah. But again, it's, you're better off just raising your rate up front, in my opinion, at least, than trying to collect on this. I don't know. I know we talked a little bit about it earlier about like, instead of charging extra line items, just raising your prices and just making it included. And full disclosure, I've never personally been in a position where I had to even negotiate that at all, or even talk about rates, because, in most cases, I've only dealt with one national firm and like 2 regional firms. The rest of them were all small local firms that aren't, they're not doing anything outside of their own individual cities anyway. So it's like, and a lot of like one shoot was like a couple shoots I've done were like for competition entry. Like they want them for their website, but the main objective was to enter it into a competition, so I think it just depends on what their intentions are as well. But yeah, again, the negotiating, using it as a negotiating point is always a good thing. Anything you can use to leverage power in the negotiation would work in your favor. I think you also need to be comfortable selling what you are selling. Like I think we should be careful to go into it, not with the intention of getting as much as we can from them. I mean, yeah, we are a business, so we do want to be profitable, but I think if we try to make a win-win situation for everybody, then it'll ultimately work in our favor. And I think that I don't want to be tricky with people. I don't want to say, oh yeah, I only give a 5-year term and I never enforce it. Like, so I don't know how I personally feel about that. So I personally don't have a limit on my license. I have a usage limit, like what they can use it for, but not a time limit.
All right. And has anybody thought about delivering their files as NFTs so we can track where they go?
Yeah, I had that discussion last year, and that's a big conversation, and I don't think it's realistic right now, but I think it's a technology that could be possible for us in the future. But right now, I mean, just the cost to make one image alone into an NFT would be incredibly expensive.
Right.
So it's like, you know, I don't think that and the truth be told is I think photographers are going to be around for a long time, but even the way we do photography is changing. I mean, the needs for imagery in general is changing, and we kind of have to evolve with it. And I think it's important to pay attention to NFTs just because it's new technology. I just don't know if there's any practical application for what we do now. Well, look, you guys, I appreciate everybody chiming in, and if you haven't throughout this call, be sure to like look and see who's all on the screen. If you want to see more of their work, be sure to check them out. And everybody say cheese for Mario's camera. Just kidding. Yeah, so again, I don't know what the topic will be next month, but I do these once a month. It's just open for the community. As you can tell, I was very careful to not try to sell anything to anybody. People get weird about that stuff. So, but I want these to be open discussions for everybody to feel comfortable sharing. And I don't know, I personally am walking away with a lot of knowledge and things to think about that I hadn't considered before. So I think if anything, that was very impactful for me. So I will be I'm going to edit this up a little bit and just try to clean up some of the stuff, but I'm probably going to be sharing this just because I think this would be a valuable thing for people to hear. If there's anything you all said that you don't want in there, let me know. Otherwise I can be pretty tactful. So I'll try to be careful with what I'm sharing. But I'm rambling as usual, if anybody's ever listened to me talk. So I'll do that. I'll do the Adam, the thing. All right, cool. I don't know how to stop talking. So I'm just gonna end this thing. I'll see you guys.
Bye, everybody.
See you, man.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.